Have you ever just stopped and wondered how we get this incredible diversity of life all around us? I mean, from the tiniest bug to the biggest whale, it all comes from one single instruction manual, right? A blueprint. And what's wild is that just like any blueprint, one little mistake, one single typo can change absolutely everything.
Okay, let's start with a really cool puzzle from the ocean. You know what a lobster looks like, right? Kind of that muddy greenish-brown color. But every now and then, we're talking like 1 in 5 million, a fisherman pulls one up that is this incredible electric blue. Now, it's not a different species, it's perfectly healthy. So, what is going on there?
Well, the secret to our blue lobster, and really the secret to the entire story of evolution, all comes down to a tiny accidental mistake, a single typo in an organism's genetic code. So today, we're going to follow the trail of that typo, from a single molecule all the way out to the vast tree of life.
To really get what that typo means, we first have to understand the language it's written in. And that takes us to the master molecule, the instruction manual for literally every living thing on this planet.
And that molecule is, you guessed it, DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. The easiest way to think about it is like a giant library that's stored inside almost every single one of your cells. Each chromosome is like a volume, a book, and a gene is a specific recipe inside that book telling the cell exactly what to do.
Now, for how unbelievably complex this molecule is, its structure is actually pretty elegant. It's a double helix, which you can just picture as a twisted ladder. The two long sides are made of something called a sugar phosphate backbone, and the rungs are made of 4 chemical letters, A, T, C, and G. But here's the absolute key, the rule that makes everything else possible. A always pairs with T, and C always pairs with G. That's it. That strict pairing is the secret sauce.
You see, because of that simple rule, DNA can make perfect copies of itself over and over. The ladder just unzips right down the middle, exposing all those letters. Then, new chemical building blocks just fly in and pair up with the exposed sides. A finds a T, C finds a G, and so on. And what do you get? 2 identical DNA ladders where you used to have just one. It's how the blueprint of life gets copied into every new cell.
Okay, so we've got the blueprint, and we know how it's copied. But a blueprint is totally useless if nobody can actually read it and build the thing, right? So how does a cell turn that code into you? That's the next piece of the puzzle.
The DNA blueprint is way too important to risk damaging it, so it stays locked away safely inside the cell's nucleus. To get the instructions out, the cell sends a messenger. This messenger is a slightly different molecule called RNA. Think of it like a quick, cheap photocopy. It's only a single strand, it uses a different kind of sugar, and it swaps out the letter T for a U, called uracil. Its whole job is to take one recipe out of the main library and carry it to the workshop.
The process of making that RNA photocopy is called transcription. It's like a scribe carefully copying a single page from the master cookbook. A little section of the DNA ladder unzips, and this messenger RNA, or mRNA, is built using one side as a template. As soon as it's done, it peels off and carries that precious message out into the main part of the cell, the cytoplasm.
Once it's out in the cytoplasm, it's time for translation. The cell's machinery reads the RNA message 3 letters at a time. Each 3-letter word, it's called a codon, tells the machinery to grab one specific amino acid. These amino acids are then chained together, one by one, and that chain folds up into a complex shape to become a protein. And proteins are the real workhorses of the cell. They do pretty much everything.
Okay, so now we know how the system is supposed to work. It's this beautiful, elegant process. But what happens when it's not perfect? What happens when there's a mistake during that DNA copying phase? Well, this is where our story gets really, really interesting.
I mean, we've all done this, right? You're sending a text, your thumb slips, and you type HTE instead of the. It's just a simple typo. Well, almost the exact same thing can happen when DNA is being copied. That little mistake is called a mutation, and it's a permanent change in the sequence of DNA letters.
And these typos basically come in 3 main flavors. First, you've got a substitution, where one letter just gets swapped for another. Then there's insertion, where an extra letter gets accidentally jammed into the sequence. And finally, deletion, where a letter is just erased. Any one of these can totally change the meaning of the genetic sentence that the cell is trying to read.
And here is the big takeaway, that one tiny change can have massive consequences. A lot of the time it's harmful, causing some kind of problem. Even more often, it actually does nothing at all. The cell just works around it. But every once in a while, just by pure random chance, the change is actually beneficial. This is it. This is the source of all genetic variation, the raw material that evolution has to work with. And, this is important, if that typo happens in an egg or a sperm cell, it can be passed down to the next generation.
So that brings us to the big picture. How does one random typo in one single animal lead to change across an entire species? Well, this is where the environment steps in and becomes the editor of life's blueprint.
The incredible naturalist Charles Darwin, he didn't know a thing about DNA, but he noticed something brilliant. He realized that all the little differences he saw among animals in a species, like the slightly different beak shapes of finches on different islands, he realized those weren't just random noise. They were the key. They were the raw material for change.
And he called this powerful editing process natural selection. The idea is actually really simple. In any environment, individuals with these random variations, which we now know come from DNA typos, might just have a tiny advantage. Maybe they can run a little faster, or they're camouflaged a bit better. Because of that edge, they tend to live longer, have more kids, and pass on those helpful traits. Over generations, the whole population begins to shift.
So, let's look at Darwin's famous tortoises. It's the perfect example. Picture an island with a bunch of tortoises. One is born with a slightly longer neck thanks to a random mutation. Now, if the main food source on that island is tall cacti, who has the advantage? The long-necked tortoise, of course. It eats better, it lives longer, and it has more babies who inherit its long-neck gene. Fast forward through many, many generations, and eventually the whole tortoise population on that island has long necks. Nature has selected for that trait.
Now, natural selection happens over mind-bogglingly long periods of time, thousands, even millions of years. So how do we actually know it happened? Well, scientists have become amazing detectives, piecing together clues left behind from the deep past.
One of the most powerful clues is the fossil record. Just look at the evolution of the horse. We can literally trace its lineage back through millions of years of fossils, from this tiny multi-toed creature that was about the size of a dog, all the way to the huge single-toed animal we have today. Each fossil is like a snapshot of evolution in action.
We can also see the evidence right in front of us, in the bodies of animals alive today. Okay, look at the bones in the arm of a human, the leg of a cat, the flipper of a whale, and the wing of a bat. They're all used for totally different things: grasping, walking, swimming, flying. But look closer. They are all built from the exact same set of bones, just stretched and squished into different shapes. These are called homologous structures, and they're screaming that all these creatures inherited that basic design from a common ancestor long ago. But fossils and bones, they're just echoes of the past. Today, we can go right to the source. We can read the story of evolution directly from the blueprint where those typos first happened. The ultimate, undeniable proof is in the DNA itself.
What this means is we can now literally read the family tree of life. By comparing the DNA sequences of different species, we can see exactly how related they are. For example, our DNA is incredibly similar to a chimpanzee's, which tells us we share a very recent common ancestor. But here's the craziest part. Scientists can find the exact same unique genetic typos in the same genes across different species. That's like finding the exact same weird spelling mistake in two different student essays. It's the strongest possible evidence they were copied from a common source.
And that brings us right back to our blue lobster. It all starts with one random typo in its DNA, which creates a brilliant blue shell. From there, the slow, relentless pressure of the environment shapes these typos over eons into new forms, new functions, new species. And this process, it never stopped. It's happening right now inside every living thing on this planet. Which leaves us with one last huge question to think about. If our genetic code is always changing, always being edited, what is evolution writing next?